Hey Addicts, welcome back. We're here to talk about the season finale of The Walking Dead Season 9. I know it's been a little bit behind schedule lately, but we're here now. And we're going to talk about this episode, and I'm so excited to talk about this episode because I've been wanting some snow in the show for years. I think zombies and snow mix very well, and I'm glad that we're finally able to see it, and I can't wait to talk about the episode. So, we're going to start with a recap. I have a condensed version of my notes, so hopefully we don't spend too long in this, but I do want to talk about it a little bit. So starting off, we get to see that Ezekiel is talking on the radio, and we don't know to who just yet, but we get to see that he's retelling the events of, I guess, kind of like what's happening in the episode, and then also like the kingdom situation. We get to see that after the whole heads on a pike ordeal, a lot of stuff went to shit with the kingdom. The pipes started leaking stuff since Henry wasn't there, which was a nice little nod. And then apparently, like there was fires at the kingdom, so this led to a lot of different things. But they ended up leaving to go to the hilltop, and so we get to see that a couple of people from the other communities, like Alden and Magnus, or part of Magnus' group, is helping them, as well as you can see, like Michonne and a couple of other people from Alexandria. And we get to see that as they're moving, it's really quite a sad ordeal for Carol, because this is the second child she's lost. So we get to see how she's trying to cope with that and how much tension it's causing between Ezekiel and her and on their relationship. And then on the road as they're moving, you get to see kind of some I don't want to say threats, but it is kind of like distaste for Lydia being there. You can definitely tell that there's tensions between the members, especially people that have lost stuff. I think Alden was the one that actually hashed out to Lydia. And as well as while they're walking, we get to see that what the hilltop's doing. Obviously, this is the second leader they've lost to the Whispers, so we get to see, I guess they've established some sort of council, kind of like Alexandria, and they've been trying to get contact with Maggie, but no success there. They haven't heard anything back to her. So that's something I liked that they were putting in there. And we may possibly get her in the last part. I mean, we'll go into that later. But also, there's this moment that I wanted to talk about because, well, first off, there's a part where they're walking, and I think you can kind of see it. It's somewhere, I think it's like right before this shot is taken, or maybe right after. They're walking across a field and they see walkers, and at first they think, well, maybe that's the Whispers keeping tabs on them. That's when we got the comment with Alden to Lydia. But I was wanting to know if that was the same field that they used, I think, in season 2, because it looked very similar. I don't know, because it's been a while since I watched it, so if anybody knows if that's for sure, and let me know, because if that is, I love it when they do that as kind of like mirror imaging. But anyway, the other one I wanted to talk about is this scene with Carol and Daryl. I really like, because we get to see that Carol's having a hard time dealing with accepting Lydia, because she knows that Henry died basically to try to save her and keep her safe, but Carol can't get past the fact that every time she looks at Lydia, she sees Henry's head on a pike. And I love the moment that Daryl has with her, with saying, like, what do you see when you look at me? Harking back to the whole Sophia incident. And I don't know, I just think that's a great, callback and also connection, because it's like, if you were able to forgive me and see me for who I am now, then you could do the same thing for, Lydia. And, obviously, Daryl doesn't go any more past than just making that one comment, but, there's a lot of depth in just the little bit that he did say. So moving on, we get to see, let's see here. Oh, yeah. So we get to go back at, wait a minute. No. Oh, I guess before, technically, I'll touch on this real quick since we're in the same scene anyway. On the road, we get to see that Ezekiel and Daryl kind of go off to the side of the road, split from the convoy to take care of some walkers. And Ezekiel, I don't think he's necessarily trying to be hostile towards Daryl, but I do think that, you can't help but kind of blame Daryl in a sense I think Carol says it really good later on that like the only reason why that he's blaming Daryl is because he can't bring himself to blame Carol, because she has this whole thing where she thinks it's her fault too. So we get to see that Ezekiel is basically asking Daryl to hightail it out of there so he can patch things up with Carol, and hoping that the hilltop is a fresh start for them. But obviously I think Daryl is more concerned with Carol and his friend. I think even Norman Reedus said that he feels like his character sympathizes with Ezekiel, but ultimately he wants to be there for Carol, first and foremost. But then we get to see that back at Alexandria, this is where this image comes in, and they're having trouble heating things. The winter's messing with the ventilation system in their house and whatever. And Gabriel, since he's in charge, he makes the comment that Negan might freeze to death if they leave him in the cell. So he brings up the idea of having Negan come stay with them. And that leads to some pretty hilarious interactions between Negan. I mean, he's able to have a little bit of fun poking into, what did he call it, like the quadruple love angle or whatever. And there's a good little moment. There's a lot of old Negan here, so that's why I do like this scene a lot. But then we get to see also moving back to the other group. Also, this is a little picture of Negan there having fun. But we get to see that, back with the other group, they are dealing with the weather pretty badly. And since they're so far away from their next waypoint, they have to stay at the sanctuary as a fun little nod for the night. And we get to see also, Lydia, I think it was right before they get to the sanctuary, or maybe it's right after they leave. Lydia tries to kill herself, or she's contemplating killing herself, and it's I'm glad they didn't go that route, because that would be waste of her character. But I do like this scene a lot because it is an Easter egg in a lot of ways to comic readers, with that being Carol's death. And I thought it was really great seeing Carol witness the potential of seeing her own comic. This is one of those things, if you're a fan of both things, it's really cool to see. But I do like this complicated interaction that Lydia and Carol had throughout the episode, and it started, I think, primarily in that scene. But then we get to see also that, while they're at the sanctuary, Michonne brings up the option of they're going to have to cross over the border that the Whisperers led so they can get to their next waypoint in time before the bulk of the storm hits. And so Ezekiel's kind of against it, but ultimately decides to go with it. And this leads to them dealing with a lot of cool walkers. I think this probably has some of the coolest walkers in at least recent memory. To be honest, I think I could say in the show's entirety, these are some of my favorite walkers, just because they have this really cool scene. They're having to cross a river to get to the next waypoint, and of course it's frozen over, but right when they're on the bank, I think this is the closest thing to, undead popping up out of the graves from under the ground, because, they're buried by the snow and they're rising up, and then we get to see, some of them are frozen, and they're just sickles, and then there's a really cool one that's outside of Hilltop eventually when they get there, but just a lot of those I really liked seeing. There's also, going back to Alexandria, this is another part, since, like I said, they're having trouble heating things, they decided to go to somebody's other house, that actually things are working. And this leads to Judah splitting off, because the dog that Daryl left was outside for some reason, and so she went off running after it, which was stupid, but just like how Carl would have acted when he was young. So, hey, I guess they're building that connection in a believable way. But we get to see that Negan actually runs out after no hesitation and is actually going to brave the elements to try to save her when nobody else did. You would think that Negan would be the last person to do this, or, you know, I mean, maybe not the last person, but, you know, you would at least think that somebody else would try to run after Negan and then maybe lose sight of him in the blizzard, because, I mean, that's their leader's daughter, you know? Like, if that girl ends up, you know, going missing or dead, like, somebody's losing their head. So, but, you know, we get to see Negan kind of becomes more of the good guy in this case, saving her and also the dog, and even suffering some wounds in the process of it. So it's a fun little thing. But then probably towards the last part of the things I'll mention is we get to see this moment where, you know, Lydia's, you know, guilt and suicidal thoughts are coming to like a head, and she splits off. Carol goes looking for her, and Lydia's just like, hey, you know, nobody has to know. You can just kill me right here. You know, I'm sorry it has to be you, but I'm too weak. You know, all these things. And it's a really powerful scene, I think, you know, not only because, you know, we've seen Carol take revenge far less severe, you know, or, you know, a lot less cause than this. And, you know, it's very believable given her background and everything, but I think she sees a bit of herself in Lydia from like her past self, because there is some parallels there if you look between, you know, maybe Carol and like the first 2-3 seasons of the show and Lydia's character now, and kind of like they're going through. So really cool moment, but, you know, ultimately, you know, Carol decides to take her under her wing, and they make it back to Hilltop, which they mention that they're going to split off from there. Obviously, the people that were helping them, that were from Alexandria, are going to go back to Alexandria before the storm hits, now that everybody that was at the Kingdom going to Hilltop is safely there. And this leads to probably one of the biggest bombshells of the episode, which is Carol splitting from Ezekiel, breaking up. And, I mean, they leave it in a way where it's open, where they could, you know, patch things up. It's more of like they're taking a break because she keeps her ring. But yeah, it's a very emotional, heavy scene. But then, you know, they kind of end, you know, seeing these characters with a happy moment with them having like a snowball fight in Alexandria. But at the very end, we get a sneak peek at the Whispers. It was kind of interesting that they added this little tidbit where, you know, and it's like after the last, what was it, the last video I did where it's like, aren't all the Whispers going to die of hypothermia? They better come up with some believable way for that, which they kind of did. They say that like they they relocate, you know, kind of head like south for the winter or whatever, and then come back. But we get to see like it's a flash forward. The winter's done, and they're back, and they're gonna presumably take care of business. So that's basically the end of the season. Okay, my impressions. I'm gonna make this really quick because I don't want this to be really long. You know, this episode in particular I really liked. I think it's going to be at least in my top 10, maybe even my top 5 episodes of the entire series, just because, you know, we finally get snow. And there's really no bad parts of the episode. Obviously, you know, like the thing with Judith running off for the dog, it's one of those things, you know, it's believable, but it is frustrating. And I don't necessarily know if that's enough to redeem Negan in the eyes of everybody in the community. But, you know, besides that fact, I think everything else was pretty solid. It's really surprising to myself because this isn't really an action-heavy episode at all, or even remotely. You know, we get a little bit here and there. But I think it's just, like, the mixture of the setting, the mixture of, like, the set, you know, how it's filmed. They did a really good job. I mean, a lot of this is filmed indoors, and it looks really great, you know? So, for me, really liked this episode in particular. I want to talk a little bit as the season as a whole, as like maybe a little bit mini review. You know, this season, it's really hard to compare it. I'd have to go back, or I'd have to rewatch this uninterrupted because, you know, I've only seen this the first run when they were actually airing with the, you know, the commercials and everything, and I think that hinders your impression a little bit if you have seen it like that and not the other way. But I think it is definitely an improvement over the last maybe 2-3 seasons. I think, you know, probably since like season 6, the show's been really rocky. I don't really necessarily know how I would stack it up against maybe some of my favorite seasons, because, you know, The Walking Dead, I've watched it since nearly the beginning, and I've loved watching the show. But I mean, I'm going to be honest in saying that a lot of the middle is very hit or miss. A lot of times it's not as good as the beginning and ending of seasons. So, you know, as a whole, I think this season is pretty solid. There's obviously some things that, you know, was not great. Some things that were, you know, could have been in a better direction. But I think overall, the big highlight to take away from this is it is a major improvement over the last few seasons. And I actually did watch Talking Dead just because I wanted to see the new showrunner, because I have heard about her, but I haven't really seen, you know, her talk and kind of get, you know, an assessment of kind of what she's about and, you know, who she is and everything. And it seems like, you know, she is an actual, like, fan, you know, that she knows the material, she knows the characters. And that leaves me hopeful for the next seasons. And so I'm looking forward to the next season. I don't know if we'll cover it on this channel as of right now. I'll just have to see, you know, what you guys want, you know, how good the videos do, you know, if the time and intrigue is still there when the show comes back. But I would say overall, I would give this season a I like it. I think, you know, I don't know if I can quite put it at a 7, you know, worth it. I'd have to go back and look, but just my, you know, my first impressions, you know, watching this the season first time, I would say it's definitely, you know, like a high 6. You know, it's definitely a lot better. You know, I think the last couple seasons, in my opinion, as a whole, I'd probably give it like a 4 or something. It was pretty bad. It's pretty hard to get through. But yeah, I liked this, and I think it definitely ended strong, a lot better than I thought it would without Rick. That, I think that's maybe one of the big highlights. You know, that, you know, both that maybe why I didn't enjoy it as much, because Rick's not there for most of the time, but at the same time, I have to give it props because it did keep me engaged for the most part, even without Rick. I think it suffers heavily without him, but I think it is impressive for what they were able to do, not only with, you know, losing Rick, but also losing Maggie, and then, you know, all the other people that they had to write off. It was a very heavy blow, and I think, you know, for what hand they were dealt, they did it pretty good. And so, you know, that's my impressions. I'd like to hear what you guys said. I mean, you know, I've talked before with some other reoccurring viewers that it's, you know, there's some parts, you know, it's like I feel like it's a chore to watch. Sometimes it's like, oh, I did like these moments, but maybe not the episode as a whole. I think it definitely, though, has some highlights in it that we haven't seen on the show for a while. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see, because I think, oh gosh, I'm not going to try to pronounce her name because I'm forgetting it off the top of my head. Michonne, she's leaving, I think, next season, or at least taking a break or whatever. But I have been liking, you know, Daryl's character coming into the fold, and I think Norman Reedus does a great job, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in the show. And if they are going to, you know, finish off the Whisperers, or leave them, or, you know, kind of finish them, but leave them open, it looks like with the radio at the end of this, you know, season, I think they're playing into that it's going to be the Commonwealth. But it very well could be Maggie. I don't know. I think it's the Commonwealth, though, because it didn't quite sound like Maggie, and I knew it definitely wasn't Rick because it sounded like a woman's voice. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think they're moving in the right direction. I just hope that they, you know, take another step instead of standing in place, because they really need to strive forward with the next season, you know, if they're going to want to bring a lot of their viewers back, and, you know, kind of leave the fans that are still not revitalized to give, you know, something to boost us in there. But anyway, guys, that'll conclude this video, and I'll be back for the comics, so you can check that out. Man, I hope we're over with the Commonwealth. Can we just skip the Commonwealth in the show? that would be great. Or just remix it, please. You know what? Just make the Commonwealth like in the Rick movies or something instead, and do something different with it. Or I don't know. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna shut up, and I'll see you guys in the comments. You know, eat your heart out. Talk away. Later.